Introducing you to people across North Carolina and around the world who put their Catholic faith into action. This is FaithWorks on Catholic 540 AM Divine Mercy Radio. Now, here's your host for FaithWorks, Ellen White.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of FaithWorks on Divine Mercy Radio. Our show highlights individuals through God's grace who put their faith into action daily. Amazing people who have an interesting, sometimes overlooked impact on our Catholic faith. On FaithWorks, we share their stories. I'm your host, Ellen White. Welcome to our monthly segment, Saints in the Making, where we explore the lives of those who lived the gospel with extraordinary faith. Today on FaithWorks, we're turning our hearts toward three powerful September feast days that call us to deeper love, humility, and trust in God. We'll reflect on the life and legacy of Saint Teresa of Calcutta, whose radical love for the poor still shakes the world. Saint Padre Pio, a mystic and confessor whose sufferings united him intimately with Christ. And finally, we'll talk about the feast of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary, a celebration of hope, promise, and the dawn of our salvation. Our guest today, as always, is Rob Agnelli, who's here to help us unpack the saints' stories and the feast day, not just to admire the saints and discover about the feast day, but to discover what they can teach us about becoming saints ourselves and why it's important to focus on particular feast days, or I guess all feast days. So welcome back, Rob. And this is, I'm quite tongue-tied because this is the first time we've talked about a feast day in particular. And I think I have some questions for you about why we should really celebrate feast days in the church. They're there for us to do that and the reasons behind them. So I'm excited about that part of this interview. Okay. Wow. Let's begin our journey with one of the most recognizable faces of mercy in our modern world, Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta. What can you tell me about her?
I think this is the first saint that we've done that was like, it's modern, right? I mean, I was alive when she was alive, and I think this is the first one. But, what's strange about her is we don't really know that much about her upbringing. Because she was really super private about it. And her family was kind of behind the Iron Curtain for a lot of the time. And so, they couldn't necessarily ask her questions. But we basically know where she was born, North Macedonia. She was ethnically Albanian. She was born in 1910.
Where's Macedonia, again, for those that are geographically challenged?
So, yeah, me too, apparently. So, like Eastern Europe.
Okay.
Eastern Europe. One of the few things we know about her upbringing is that her father, both her parents were pious, with hearts for the poor. Her father was sort of an Albanian nationalist, and apparently kind of caught the attention of the people in the Ottoman Empire, because it was part of the Ottoman Empire at the time, and they poisoned him. Ooh. And so he died when she was 9. And, interestingly enough, this is where we begin to get a little glimpse of her kind of sanctity, is her mom sent her to get a priest, and she went and knocked on the parish door, got no answer, and then inexplicably went to the train station and found a priest there. And this priest no one ever saw again, but, comes and hears her father's confession, gives him, anoints him, brings him the Eucharist, and then just sort of vanishes off into the night. And so then, she spends the rest of her kind of period of growing up without her father. And, her mother is really struggling to raise her and her brother and her sister. But her mother did teach her how to see Jesus in the poor. And so no matter how hard things were, she taught them to see Jesus in the poor. And so they were always working with the poor around them. And then she gets this sort of stokes her desire to become a missionary. And then she begins to sort of sense this call. She's probably about 11 or 12 at the time. And then, again, we don't know much in between there. We just know at 18, she left Macedonia to go to Ireland to join the Sisters of Loreto.
And, I was thinking about the Holy House of Loreto in Italy. Is there a connection with the Sisters of
Yeah,
Loreto?
they are obviously named after,
Okay.
with a special devotion to Our Lady of Loreto
Okay.
and the Holy Family.
Okay.
But yes, there is a connection.
And I was not familiar with her upbringing. So with her parents being pious and their service or hearts for the poor, that kind of led the way for her to be open to it.
It put it on her radar, right?
And serving the poorest of the poor in India. So how did she get from Ireland to India?
Yeah,
That's quite a jump.
The Sisters of Loreto had a school.
Okay.
In India, in Calcutta.
Okay.
So she goes to Dublin, learns English, and then they send her off for teaching and evangelism in India. And this is, she's still probably 18, maybe 19 at the time. And so she goes to this school, St. Mary's School in Calcutta. And there she's working with the wealthier, the children of the wealthy. But she occasionally will take them into Calcutta and have them work with the poor. But there was nothing necessarily, it wasn't like she just went there and all of a sudden it was like that she had this, conversion experience or something. It was, ultimately, World War II breaks out, and she's left alone, her and two other sisters with the girls, and kind of taking care of them, and this is where the city of Calcutta really becomes, sort of what it is modern day, kind of a mess. And so after this, she needs a break. She goes on a retreat. She's sitting on a train, and she has this vision of Jesus, and the gist is that Jesus, calls her to a sort of a vocation within the vocation. And tells her, his thirst demands that she go and work with the poor. There's
this amazing, is it a poem or something that she's written? I Thirst is the heading, and it's quite powerful. And I highly recommend that you check that out for reflection and meditation. I've heard several priests recite it, and it is incredible. So how he's on the cross during his passion, and he says, "I thirst," which is a reference to how he's thirsting for souls, and she desires to provide these souls for him.
Yep.
And that was the only time that she experienced this vision of Christ,
it was
right?
one. He gives her instructions. She goes to the Archbishop in Calcutta. Takes about probably a little bit over a year or so to really get things rolling, and ends up by 1950, she has formed the Sisters of Charity and has the Missionaries of Charity and has the Vatican approval for it.
We talked the last time about a couple of saints that were living during a time of some major political upheaval, and here we are again with World War II and what ultimately happened with Calcutta and in that environment, and something that keeps coming back, actually, Rob. And if you can comment on this. I'm throwing in a sideways here comment, but how the poor will always be with us, always, until the end of time. So reflect on that a little bit and tell me what your thoughts are on that point.
Yeah, it's funny. We use the word poor, right? And it's probably not a good word to use because we also think poverty is a good thing, right? And so...
Wait, what do you mean? We think poverty is a good thing?
So we look at poverty as a Christian virtue, right?
Yes.
And so, when we're talking about it, I think it's better to use the word destitute because it makes it seem, okay, they don't have everything they need, right? Because there's plenty of, especially in the West here, there are poor people, but there's very few destitute people, materially speaking, right? But what sort of Mother Teresa was all about was the fact that it didn't really matter. Most of the people that she ministered to, whether she was pulling them up out of the gutter or when she's talking to people in the West, were spiritually destitute, right? And so I think that the reason why our Lord sort of promises that the poor will always be with us is because, well, one, he identifies himself with them, but two, there's no other, you have to recognize the need, you have to recognize that you need something in order to know that you need God. All right. And so it's one of those sort of, I guess, signals, when you don't have everything you need, that really the one thing necessary is God. And when you have God, you have all you need. And so it makes sense, first of all, from the perspective of the person who is poor, but also from the perspective of the people who have to give, right? That we are to be conduits of God's love. And so I think it's necessary on both ends, right?
Wow. Tons to meditate on there. Okay. So tell me, back to Mother Teresa, what ways did she model the Beatitudes or the gospel in daily life?
Yeah,
What would
you
say?
sort of already touched on this a little bit, and I think one of the reasons why we find the saints so compelling, and in her case, like why the whole world thought she was so compelling, is that we have this sort of question we always ask, like, what would Jesus have been like walking around on the streets, Jerusalem with him, and what happens if he would be incarnated now, right? And the saints are always the answer to the question of what would happen if he was incarnated now, because he sends the saints into the world, and to the particular place and time where, his mercy and his love is most needed. And so what Mother Teresa did was she set out to turn the world back to Christ. And that's exactly what she did. And she took the gospel, which is what all the saints do, took the gospel literally, took Matthew 25 literally, that, you serve Christ in the least of these. So she went out to find Christ in the least of these.
There are so many stories about what the sisters witnessed when they were with her, serving the various people in the community in Calcutta, and how that helped them understand truly what love meant. And I remember reading somewhere that obviously she didn't just serve the Catholic population, she served everybody, and that in itself is a lesson for me.
Yeah.
We're called to serve everyone that's in need.
Yeah, and I think one of my favorite stories actually is sort of along those lines. I think everyone's heard or at least knows of like her prayer breakfast speech. Have you ever heard her prayer breakfast
Wasn't
speech?
that the Nobel Peace Prize?
Well, no. So in
experience, or was it
1994,
separate?
she was invited to the National Prayer Breakfast in the United States.
Yeah.
And she decided she was going to tell them about how horrible abortion is, right? And this is when, Bill Clinton is president and Hillary Clinton's there. And she just no holds bars, just how sort of spiritually destitute a society has to be for a mother to kill its children, right? And so you can imagine that, Hillary Clinton, being very pro-abortion, really didn't appreciate it. And very sort of, I won't necessarily impugn her motives, but started to talk to Mother Teresa about adoption, sort of like if there were more adoptions. And so Mother Teresa said to her, so are you volunteering to start a home here in D.C.? I'd love to work with you on this for adoptions. And of course, at this point, Hillary Clinton sort of locked in, right? But the thing is, like, it wasn't just that she sort of was like, okay, well, I'll show her. She actually went and tried to convert her. She would write her these beautiful letters. And so much so that Hillary Clinton herself said, these are the first letters I've ever gotten from Christians that didn't want to kill me. And at her funeral, at Mother Teresa's funeral, the new sort of Mother Superior asked her to distribute miraculous medals, asked Hillary Clinton to, and she did. So she gave out miraculous medals, right? And so this profound, Mother Teresa, she didn't dampen the truth of what she believed. She told her what she believed, but she was willing to meet her there and try to move her. And that's because she's spiritually destitute, right? And that to me is like, it's a perfect microcosm of how a saint is supposed to operate. Because she would tell people all the time, like, sort of like, work where you're planted, right? Because people would go to her and go, like, what can I do? Like, I want to do this. It's like, no. Go where God has planted you and evangelize those people there and bring the gospel. And that's exactly what she would do. Every opportunity she got, which is so beautiful.
And you think that with somebody like Mother Teresa, that she was so connected on a regular basis to her relationship to Christ and Blessed Mother, and had this direct channel with them. But it's well known that she experienced long periods of dryness. How did she stay faithful in the midst of that?
I mean, the sort of obvious answer is just fidelity to grace, right? But she knew, because again, she trusted that God knew what He was doing. She knew that was for her good, right? And so, like all the saints, she identified with Christ, and she found moments in Christ's life that she identified with. She identified with Him on the cross, where He sort of experiences that same sort of abandonment, right? And it's not a cry of like a lack of faith. It's a cry of like, I'm experiencing this spiritual dryness. And so when, you mentioned the I thirst, that's in their chapels, right? Like, that they want to give, Christ the souls and all the things He's thirsting for. Right. And so she sort of experienced the same thirst for God. And it motivated her and pushed her to keep going. And so she just, she would never, and again, this is one of the ways, I think this is where it's important, right? Because we all go through spiritual dryness, right? Like not 50 years of it per se. And the way you check to make sure that it's just spiritual dryness and it's good for you is, do you still desire God? And in that, all that kept happening was her desire just kept increasing and increasing, right? And that's what God does. And so that's, it's a good way for all of us to sort of test, like, okay, am I getting just complacent or lazy? Or, is my desire for God increasing?
Growing.
Yeah.
It reminds me of St. Peter, his thorn in the flesh kind of thing.
Yeah, with St. Paul, where he is.
Paul.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So yes, in a lot of ways, like it's there's still imperfections there that impede our desire for God, right? So he has this vision of God, and God is like, well, I've given you this vision, but it could be really easy for you to get pulled away from me because you think that's all there is. Like I have so much more to give you. So I want you to realize that, and I want to remind you of that as your desire increases, you will be happier in the end because I'm going to match that desire.
Well, I have two really good questions, but we're running out of time. So I like this one. What's one lesson Catholics today can take away from her spiritual discipline and charity?
Yeah,
what do you think?
I think we keep going back to that sort of that thirst for souls, right?
Right.
At the heart of her spirituality was that the sisters first had to relieve Jesus's thirst for their souls. And so everything was rooted in prayer. They spend an inordinate amount of time, you would think, they're out working, but they spend several hours a day in prayer. And that is because, first and foremost, like they're going to quench Jesus' thirst for their own souls. And the beautiful thing about it is, I think, and this is for most of us and most of the people who are listening, is there's this nearly perfect union of sort of the contemplative and active life, right? She knew that there is a tendency, right, to be pulled into this sort of social activism rather than being an apostle and an evangelist. And the protection against that is a life of deep prayer.
I remember reading somewhere that she spent hours a day in adoration.
Yeah, all of them, like all the sisters do.
Wow, that's so amazing. All right, well, let's transition now, kind of split it up a little bit to the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary that we celebrate on September 8th. First, why, Rob, do you think it's important to celebrate feast days in the church as a family, as a community? What's the point?
I mean, the reason is, I think we talked about this before, the need to sort of, now, to rebuild a Catholic culture starts with feast days, right? Days we can celebrate together.
Yes.
And in that way, you build the culture because it makes it easier to evangelize. But it makes the things like feast days, it makes them actual events of joy in your life when you set them aside and celebrate them and not just merely sort of mark them, right? Like, I think we've talked about this before, but you think about something like, I don't know, Memorial Day, right? Like, does anyone really celebrate Memorial Day? No, because like in a lot of ways, it's not something that we're like all united behind. It's not something that, has these, has this, we are trying to remember people who have given their lives for us, but we don't all agree on where those people are or what happened or what. So there's no joy around it, right? There's no festivity around it. It's just day off from work.
Yeah.
And,
day off, or maybe it's a cookout.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get
maybe.
together with family and friends. Maybe.
But only like in feast days, right? Can you have festivity, which is where joy comes in, right?
Yes.
And who's going to turn down joy?
Well, I was telling you on the way in this morning, and I thought I didn't mention it with Mother Teresa, that I saw on a bumper sticker that don't delay joy. And you said joy is the net that Jesus uses to catch people, something that Mother Teresa said. So here we go with joy. Maybe that's our theme for this one. All right. So why does the church celebrate Mary's birth?
On September 8th or just in general?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone really knows. So
tradition.
It's a tradition thing. Probably first starts in the East in the 5th and 6th century, because that's where sort of Marian devotion really sort of blossomed, because of the Council of Ephesus in 430. And I think it's the Eastern Catholics. There's a sort of a, I guess you would call it a apocryphal or proto-canonical book called the Evangelium of James.
Oh, okay.
Which it's from like the early 2nd century, and it's where we get most of our sort of information about Mary's childhood. That's how we know her parents' names. And so in there's a lot about her nativity in there. And so I think it was always sort of in the mind of the Eastern Catholics. And then it became something that the whole church essentially celebrated. What isn't clear, though, is December 8th and September 8th, 9 months apart. Yeah. Which one came first? So it makes sense when fitted together, but which of the dates came first, it's not totally clear.
And so if we happen to have our Protestant brothers and sisters that are tuning in and saying, see, there the Catholic Church goes again, they're putting too much emphasis on the Blessed Mother or Mary, why are they so focused on her and not entirely on Jesus? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean...
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, this is where, what I will normally say to that is to understand that... okay, so let's take just the idea that, like, with Mary, when she's born, like, salvation has already come. Like, it's come in the flesh, right? Like, Jesus has saved someone from the fall. And so that when you have this sort of objection to, as if that somehow took away from Jesus, right? Because I've often heard people say, like, oh, well, like, why didn't he just save everyone before they fell? Right? And you could say, well, I guess he could have, right? But he chose to do it this way. What Mary tells us is, oh, he could have, he did. But he chose to do it the other way freely. He was never bound in any way, right? And so that act of redemption actually, like in the Protestant mindset where you don't include Mary, actually is not as powerful as it is from the Catholic conception, because Jesus did stop someone from falling, right? And God in his infinite mercy and wisdom decided that was not the way he was going to save the rest of mankind, but shows us his power. So the question is the Catholic conception of Jesus more powerful than the Protestant conception? And I would say yes. 100%, right? And so the point is that people, when you do that, you think that somehow Mary is taking away from Jesus, but when you do that, you take away from Jesus, right? When you take Mary away from Jesus, it's the same thing with the Assumption, right? That the question is, like, why aren't people assumed automatically to heaven? Like, could God do that? Yes, in fact, he did, right? But he chose to do it the other way with the rest of us, right? And so, again, you've diminished the act of redemption by somehow. So it's a weird sort of argument, because it's exactly the opposite of what you're saying. It doesn't take away from Jesus at all. It actually shows that his act of redemption was greater than you think it is.
Yeah. If you're just tuning in, this is Ellen White with FaithWorks on Divine Mercy Radio. And today I'm speaking with Rob Agnelli about the lives of Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta, the feast day of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary and St. Padre Pio. We are grateful for our show's sponsor, Thales College. All right, so what are some traditional ways Catholics have celebrated this feast in the past, Rob?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit already about just in the eastern part of the church, it's one of the 12 great feasts, and so they have these beautiful sort of liturgies and processions surrounding it. One of the kind of cool ones is, I think it's in Milan, they have this devotion called Maria Bambina, which is just Mary the baby. Mary the baby. And they have this statue that they bring out once a year to venerate on September 8th, and it's in the care of the Sisters of Charity there. And they've had so many miracles attached to this statue, right? So much so now that they actually take cloths, touch it to them, and then distribute the cloths. So it's clearly something that God has blessed. And I think, with all of these things, right? Like Mary was a baby, right? Like it's good to remember, like she is a real person who lived a real life.
And reflecting on her parents, and especially St. Anne, she is a powerful intercessor.
Yeah.
So, I think when you're talking about Mary the baby, I'm thinking about the statues of St. Anne and the little girl, Mary. And that's really good to meditate on too. So, I was thinking more about like families and individuals, and have you celebrated feast days on a regular?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things we do, like we will celebrate most of the Marian feast days, the Feast of the Sacred Heart, all of our patron saints days. So what we did with the boys when they were younger, we actually still did it because my 24-year-old just came and visited us on St. Dominic's feast day, and I was like, well, you get to pick dinner and dessert. So when they were younger, we would have them pick dinner and dessert on their feast days, so that it became something that they celebrate, right, and something they remember. And the boys, now that they're older, they still celebrate it, even when they're not with us. So I think it's again one of those ways in which you start with making your family culture a Catholic culture, and then it spreads out.
I didn't come to this until, cradle Catholic, until I was, late 20s, early 30s, where I started really appreciating the beauty of the church and saints' feast days and what they're able to do for us here on earth, and started incorporating some things with the feast days. So I think so many people today are so blessed in the church with so much that we can use at our disposal to really celebrate the liturgy and the feast days and everything. All right. With this particular celebration, how can this feast help us grow closer to Mary and through her, which I think is the point, to Christ? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think, of course, Mary always reveals Christ to us, right? Always. And this, I think, feast in particular should help us we should be amazed by Mary. Like, we should be amazed by what grace can do. Like, if you don't reflect on the life of Mary and think, wow, grace, like what grace can do to us, and it not sort of motivate you to be more faithful to the graces that God sends you, right? Because, she was perfect. Right. And that's, not because she tried harder than everybody else, is because she was full of grace. And so grace absolutely transforms us. And so I think it's a good time to reflect on that, right? Like a good time to reflect that if we open ourselves to grace, like God can do amazing things.
I have a devotion to Our Lady of Sorrows. And it occurred to me at some point that, just because she's full of grace doesn't mean that she doesn't experience suffering or pain. It's almost like she experiences that more so because she's full of grace. What would you say?
Yeah, 100%. So, she doesn't, because she doesn't sort of suffer the effects of the fall, and Christ is the same way, her emotions are way stronger than we can possibly imagine, right? So her sorrow, like in the face of evil, like we see something evil, and we might sort of experience this sort of mixture of fear and, I don't know, maybe like, a little bit of, like that's kind of like a little bit of glamour in it. Like, but she experiences it as purely evil. And so she has this interior response to it that's completely proper, which is way stronger than we experience, right?
Just the intensity and the depth.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely proper. That's a great way to put it. All right. Anything else you want to say about celebrating feast days, or should we just get right into Padre Pio?
We can keep moving on to Padre Pio.
One of my family's favorite, for sure. Celebrated on September 23rd, and so many things have happened on September 23rd in our family. Oh, that's why it's Padre Pio. Thanks, bud. So tell me about some key moments in his early years that revealed his unique spiritual gifts, Rob.
So he's one of those saints that actually didn't realize that what he was experiencing was like sort of, abnormal. So there's a story of him when he's about 5 years old. He has this vision of Christ and the Blessed Mother, and Christ appears to him and calls him to the priesthood, and he sort of just takes that for granted, right? And about, I guess, when he is in seminary, somebody says something to him about visions, and he's like, "Wait, you don't see the Madonna?" He's like, "Are you sure you're just not saying that out of holy humility?" Like, he thought everyone, like, Christ was real to him, and Blessed Mother was real to him, his guardian angel was real to him, devil was real to him. He's like, everybody sees this, right? And so he experiences like these visions very early on, and his response to them is pure and proper, because he realizes he thinks they're real in the sense of like that's just what happens with everybody, right? And so there's no question that they're real to him, right? And so he's like, oh, Jesus asked me to do this, so I'll do this. But I think probably at his sort of the most impactful vision he had was when he was 15, and he has this man, this sort of majestic man of rare beauty. That's what appeared to him, which is Christ. And he brings him to a battlefield. And on one side is an army clad in white, and on another side is an army clad in black. And
I'm thinking of Saint Maximilian Kolbe.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar, right? And in the middle of this battlefield is this giant black sort of creature who is as tall as the sky. And our Lord says, if you battle him, I'll give you a crown. And so Padre Pio battles him and wins. And he says, I will give you a crown and I will be with you. And then he asks him, will you battle him continually, and I'll give you an even greater crown? And so Padre Pio says yes.
And this is when he was 15.
15.
I've never heard this story before.
Yeah. So,
okay.
And this probably is sort of like his foundational moment where, he gets his mission, right? And his mission is to sort of openly fight the evil one. It's very, very much out of the sort of, David and Goliath kind of image, right? And so he sort of was given the option to like battle the devil head on for the rest of his life. And, he knew with our Lord, he could do it. And so he did. And so that sort of set the tone for his life.
His virtues of obedience and humility, I wonder if, because he knew that this was a battle that he was going to be fighting his entire life, that those two virtues were going to be paramount.
Those are weapons, right? Like those are weapons. In fact, those are the strongest weapons against the devil.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, right. All right, so he's well known to have had the stigmata. I mean, you'll see several images of Padre Pio with the gloves on as he's celebrating Mass, especially at the moment of consecration. It's so beautiful. And how blessed we are to have the video of him actually doing Mass. So if you have an opportunity, go on YouTube and Google Padre Pio Mass with the stigmata. So for those that are listening that might not even know what the stigmata is, tell us again.
So the stigmata are just the wounds of Christ.
Right.
And, various saints have had them. St. Francis had them. St. Catherine of Siena had them. But essentially it's, nail holes in the hands or the wrists, in the feet, and then in their side. And then some people will have the wounds on the head from the crown of thorns. But I think to sort of understand Padre Pio, when he was ordained, he wanted to be, he wants to conform himself to Christ. He wanted to be a priest, but like Christ, he wanted to be a priest and victim. And so he gave himself to Christ as a victim soul because he knew that if he suffered with Christ, that was an effective way to save souls. And so he gets the stigmata very shortly after he's ordained a priest, I think less than a month later. But he asks our Lord to hide them because he's embarrassed. Like he's embarrassed by the attention of them. And so the wounds disappear while the pain sort of stayed there. And then he continues to suffer ill health for a while. He has to go back to his family. But about 8 years later, he gets them like visible again. And then they remained up until about 2 days before he died. So he would, he obviously people would see them, right? Mm-hmm. And the really kind of cool thing is many people sort of once it spread, many people would come out of curiosity to see this. It's kind of a sign and wonder, but at no time did anyone leave untouched by him because of the way he was.
I mean, even to this day, you've been there, haven't you been?
No, I have not.
Oh, Rob,
yeah,
you are in for a treat. Well, we had the blessed opportunity of going a couple of years ago, and because of especially my husband's devotion to him, and we walk into the little chapel where he was overcome with emotion and couldn't say anything. He had to go sit down. So I mean,
it's beautiful.
Everybody experiences that, and I've also heard stories about people that were actually there. Praying in that church, and there's someone in the shape of Padre Pio that kind of goes out. So it's really
not surprising.
I know, it's incredible. So, despite the spiritual gifts that he had, he embraced suffering. That's how he wanted to save souls, by being a victim for Christ. How did he respond to it on a regular basis? There was some time where he was not even able to hear confessions or celebrate.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
part of conforming yourself to Christ is to be a victim of misunderstanding, envy. So again, it's like the perfect conforming to Christ, right? And so there were a lot of people in the church, especially in the hierarchy, who had either lost faith or thought he was a fraud or sort of diabolically possessed. There's one doctor in particular who was a Franciscan friar. His name was Gemelli, who is it's actually the hospital in Rome is named after him.
Yes.
He examined Padre Pio at the behest of someone at the Vatican, and he just said he was deluded, and it was caused by autosuggestion. Which is
crazy.
It's a pretty Freudian sort of explanation for the fact that he's bleeding, and
they can't explain it.
The wounds don't get infected. They don't change. They don't heal. They don't do anything. They just continually just bleed. And so eventually, they sort of convinced the Holy Office to issue a decree, sort of forbidding his public ministry, and then very quickly, within 2 years, Pius XI sort of comes to his senses and says, I haven't been badly disposed to Padre Pio. I've been badly informed. And so he sort of lifted the ban on him. But, in all these things, Padre Pio's response was pretty much the same for any suffering that came his way. It's just, thy will be done. And he knew that his suffering was probably more fruitful because of United to Christ suffering than any of the work he was going to do anyway.
He had a great love for America.
Yeah, and that's because his. I don't know if you know the story about
his
dad. Yeah, so his dad could not afford to educate him. He knew he had a call to the priesthood, so he went to America to work for 2 years just to get the money for him to become educated to become a priest.
Wow, so his life obviously centered on the confessional, hearing confession after confession, which is like the Kyrie of ours, and the Eucharist. What does that say to us today?
To me, what amazes me about these stories is just how simple the formula for holiness is, right? Like the saints do it. Like show me a saint that doesn't have a devotion to the Eucharist. Mm-hmm. Show me a saint that doesn't have a devotion to Our Lady, right? Like the sacraments. If you base your entire life on the sacraments, which is the means that Christ has used for us to get access to redemption and the fruits of redemption, and then you're going to be fine, right? And so it's not really surprising to see that like his life centered on those two things, because that's really, as a Catholic, where our life should center. And, you know, he, as sort of proof of his belief, he would often have visions during Mass of, you know, of Christ on the cross. And, you know, he had a lot of people just convert from going to Mass with him because of the way he said Mass. And so it's sort of proof of his fundamental belief that even his Masses were fruitful for conversion.
Okay, so what does it mean to imitate a saint like Padre Pio, who had these extraordinary gifts? And some people might be saying, right, I don't have the stigmata. How can I imitate?
I mean, it's hard to imagine like a charismatic gift he didn't have. But the thing, I think that where they sort of all, I think he sort of answered the question like, okay, how do you sort of follow in his footsteps with his prayer groups, right? So what he did in the 50s was begin to form what he called came to be called the Padre Pio prayer groups. And these were groups of people who were striving for holiness, who dedicated themselves to petitionary prayer, right? Which, you know, in some people is a charismatic gift, but we're all called to it, right? And so, and that was really at the heart of his ministry anyway, was, you know, he was constantly in prayer, in petition for the salvation of souls, right? And so, you know, yes, he had these extraordinary gifts, but in you know, the means might be different. Like his means were, you know, sort of supernatural and wondrous, but the end is the same. And like, I think we're called to the same thing, is to sort of live that life of, you know, of petitionary prayer.
And I know that God provides what we need for each moment to be able to do that. And he also, Padre Pio had spiritual sons and daughters, and he said he would do that until the end of time. So you can, if you feel like you're being called to be a spiritual son or daughter of Padre Pio, you can certainly do that too.
What do they call it? The odor of sanctity.
Yes.
That he would very often, someone would, you know, this is even when he's still alive, like one of his spiritual sons or daughters would be praying, and all of a sudden they would smell roses. Or they'd be doing something and they'd smell something really foul. And then they'd go and talk to him, and he was like, oh, that was me. So the presence, you know, which is, I think, kind of ironic when the church sort of said it. How do you shut down somebody who bilocates? Like, you know what I mean? It's pretty funny.
All right, you can't say that and not explain it. So for those that are listening that don't know what bilocation means, what does that mean, especially as it relates to Padre Pio?
Yeah, so he would be in two places at once. He would be
sometimes
at prayer.
More than two.
Yeah,
right?
He would be at prayer. Like he has been seen, like you said, you know, he had a sort of special devotion to America. The number of people who saw him in America.
Or even in the sky.
Yeah.
When pilots were flying.
You know, he would, and in fact, I think even there were several times where, you know, some people said, wondered whether the Second Vatican Council was being held at the Vatican or at the Rotundo, right?
Yeah.
Because like people would see him there or people would consult him. And so God gave him this sort of gift, right? And this gift, it you know, on the one hand, it's sort of a strange gift, right? But what it ultimately is, right, is we begin to see how those gifts we share in the resurrection, right? Because Christ, in his resurrected body, could do the same thing, where he could go and, you know, be in two places at once. And so that's, you know, really important for us to sort of understand that, yes, it's a gift, but not something that, you know, is totally, you know, unheard of.
Wow. Okay. So if there's one message you'd like for our listeners to take away from Mother Teresa, Padre Pio, or the Feast of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary, what would it be? There's so much.
Yeah, I think like if you try to find one theme sort of woven through them, it's that just to spend time in prayer, quenching the thirst of Christ, right? Like quench. I think it's Saint Teresa of Avila talks about prayer as being the place where our thirst meets Christ's thirst, right? It's sort of this collision of two thirsts, right? That. And so, just basing your life first in a life of prayer, and then everything else sort of falls into place after that.
Any other comments?
I think that's it.
Wow. As always, there are so many different things that I can take away. I have notes all over my own notes here that I'm going to reflect on for sure later. Thank you so much, Rob. As we wrap up today's episode of Saints in the Making, we're reminded that the path to holiness isn't reserved for the few. It's a call for each of us, and each calling looks unique. Through the quiet compassion of Mother Teresa, the mystical suffering and deep faith of Padre Pio, and the joyful birth of the Blessed Virgin Mary, we see three very different experiences, lives of saints, yet each fully open to God's grace. Their stories challenge us to ask, how are we responding to that same call? Whether through acts of charity, prayerful endurance, or simple faithfulness, we're all invited to become saints in the making. If you missed any part of this episode or want to catch up on past conversations filled with inspiration and hope, and don't forget, you can take FaithWorks with you wherever you go. Just download the free Divine Mercy Radio app from your app store. Simply search Divine Mercy Radio NC, and you're all set to listen anytime, anywhere. Until next time, keep living your faith boldly, because faith works. Blessed Mother, Saint Teresa of Calcutta, and Saint Padre Pio, pray for us. God bless.